Okay, good evening, councillors, officers, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to say that you're very welcome to tonight's meeting here being held at the Highfields School. I don't believe there'll be any fire alarms, so if you do hear anything, there's no testing, so if you do hear something, please find the nearest exit. And there are some behind it over this side and obviously where we came in, so if we can make an orderly fashion out if something does arise. Okay, now it has been brought to my attention that we usually record these meetings and they go out actually live. It is being recorded, but it is not physically going out right promptly now. It will be going out as soon as it can get back, because we haven't got any feed here to actually stream it live. Any members of the public who do not wish to be taken on camera, can you please let the Democratic Services know before we start? Another point that I'd like to just bring on board is, can I just remind all members to be careful of how we treat and be civil and respectful for everybody within this meeting and beyond. Thank you. So we'll start with item 1, and that's the apologies. So I'll move to Simon, please. Have we got apologies?
Apologies received from Councillors Robert Archer, Paul Cruz, Steve Flitter and Lewis Rose.
Is Councillor O'Brien here? Did you say O'Brien as well?
Oh, yes, sorry, there is also Councillor Peter O'Brien. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay. Item 2 is public participation. On this, we have a member of the public to speak on item 11. So if I could ask Mr. Elliott, Graham Elliott, to please come forward. 3 minutes. Just like to explain, you've got 3 minutes, Mr. Elliott, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, there have been lots of comments and media articles on the issue of the Black's Head figure, many without substance or relevance to the facts. Whilst there is no place for racism in today's society, simply claiming something is racist without being able to substantiate the statement with facts does not mean that the subject is racist. I have tried to discover the facts behind the Black's Head figure and have entered into extensive correspondence with the well-known and respected historian Maxwell Craven OBE, who must be one of the foremost authorities on Derbyshire history. Mr. Craven has confirmed that the Black's Head figure was probably connected to the Saracen's Head pub, which is recorded in Ashbourne in 1789 and commemorates a connection with the Shirley family. The Shirley family held extensive land holdings, and there are records of them having property in Ashbourne in 1338 and throughout the 18th century. The blackamoor crest of the Shirley family on their coat of arms is believed to be as a result of a member of that family going on the Crusades in the late 1100s. The Shirley family had substantial influence, not just in Ashbourne, but throughout England, spanning several centuries, and therefore the connection of the Black's Head as part of the family crest and as an acknowledgement to that family's status is not surprising. It is for these facts, rather than unsubstantiated claims of racial connection, that the Black's Head should be returned to Ashbourne, and these facts should be made available to explain its relevance to the town. Ashbourne Town Council has previously passed a resolution to accept the legal ownership of the gallows sign and the Black's Head, and I would implore you to transfer the legal ownership so that the sign and figure can be properly maintained for future generations. Together with the Green Man building, the gallows sign and the Black's Head figure is Grade 2 star listed. That puts it amongst the top 5.8% of all listed buildings according to Historic England, who I've also had extensive correspondence with. This isn't just some run-of-the-mill pub sign. There is guidance from Historic England on how such figures such as the Black's Head should be dealt with, and this council can no more disregard that guidance than its own planning policies. Calls for it not to be returned to Ashbourne or for covenants to be placed on how it should be dealt with fly in the face of planning law and the listed building status. This council also commissioned a consultation into the future of the Black's Head figure, and none of the original responses wanted to see the figure removed. Of those who made representations after the closure of consultation, only one did so but failed to justify their claim that it was racist. Surely there is no point in consulting in...
Mr. Elliott, I'm going to have to stop you there. Sorry. We've had the 3 minutes. Sorry. Beg your pardon.
Chair, I've got a transcript of the comments. Would it help, or is it allowed to pass those?
No, sorry.
No, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Okay. As regards the public, can I just draw the attention to members that there have been 2 questions put by members of the public, questions from Mr. Dobbs and Mr. Smith. Sorry, I said 2 questions, it might be more than that, but they are actually on a piece of paper in front of you. They're not going to be read out, but they will be put onto the website. There are the responses. Sorry. Councillor Gamble.
Can I ask a question? When you said these go on the website, will they properly go on the website this time? Unlike the questions asked at Governance and Resources last Thursday, which only appeared in the minute book about 3 hours ago.
I will pass it on to Office.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Gamble. I believe that the documents, if they're not there already, they'll be there tomorrow morning.
Okay. So move on to item 3, the approval of minutes. To receive the recording and the minutes from the 14th of October. Do I find a mover for these minutes? Councillor Morley and Councillor Mrs Morley.
Can I speak?
Councillor Gamble.
Can I say why I'm not going to pass to approve these minutes? These minutes don't include questions asked by members last time, apparently because the monitoring officer says that they weren't dealt with, so they don't go on the minutes.
That's correct.
They're not being held, they're not counted as an item that's still to be debated and still put onto another agenda. So where do these questions actually sit? There seems to be some sort of monitoring officer purgatory where they're not on the agenda as being asked, as to be asked now, and they're not minuted as having been dealt with. And also the question of supplementary questions which are now being denied to us.
In the respect of the minutes that are being brought tonight, it's about what actually happened within that meeting and not whether the questions were on or not. So in a sense, the minutes are as what happened at the meeting. And that is a record of what happened. In that case,
then, those questions haven't been dealt with, so why aren't they on the agenda? They can't be neither.
As regards questions, I'm led to believe that if they do not get spoke on that meeting, they have to be re-put to the next agenda.
Exactly. The last agenda at the end said items 13 to 19 will be referred to a future meeting. The questions that weren't asked when we weren't given enough opportunity for a supplementary question were part of items 13 to 19. So why aren't these referred to a future meeting?
Chair, if I can help.
Yep.
Members have been in an extensive level of correspondence with me in the last week regarding this matter. responses to the questions that were put were given. The right to a supplementary question is dependent on the matter being heard. The matter wasn't heard. It can't be recorded in the minutes because it wasn't heard. Therefore, the responses were given. There are opportunities to ask further questions at this meeting, which members have taken the opportunity to do. But, if you'll let me finish, I have taken a view, which I've explained to all members prior to the last council meeting, and to almost half the council prior to this meeting in emails that certainly you've been privy to, Councillor Gamble, that it's my interpretation that the rules of this meeting should have been amended by way of a consequential amendment when Council changed the delegations for the meeting in July 2020. Now, that was prior to my arrival. I didn't pick up on it immediately, but I've been reviewing the effectiveness of this meeting, as you'd expect me to do, as it is my responsibility to do. You employ me as monitoring officer to take a view and advise you. I also have delegated authority to make consequential amendments. And in my view, I have exercised that delegated authority to vary the order of the agenda for a number of reasons. First, and I don't wish to go on at length, but I think it's important given the questions being asked, is to ensure that the business that has to be transacted, where decisions are required for operational reasons or whatever it might be, they can be dealt with. There are no decisions arising from questions. So I've taken the view, based on my experience of working in other authorities, that actually that should be put to the end of the agenda. There's no reason why this council can't get to the end of the agenda and those questions be put. That's a matter for how members want to manage the way that the meeting operates and the contributions that they wish to make. We, as officers, and I as the monitoring officer, have taken a view that that's how it should be. I'm quite happy for the Constitution Working Group to consider this in due course, and I think I made that offer prior to the last council meeting. There's a broader conversation about how these meetings work that's probably needed. But I think in terms of the context of where we are, to get business transacted, and taking into account the venue that we're in, which, you know, we're here at the moment, we've seen what's happening with COVID in other parts of Europe presently. We don't know how things are going to play out. There are decisions that need to be made. Therefore, my advice to councillors is that needs to be prioritised. And it hasn't been done lightly. I do not want to say to any member of this council, you're going to be denied your right. I don't believe you've been denied your right to ask a question. You have the opportunity to ask questions in the meeting. You have opportunities to ask questions by email, and members take advantage of that. I know perfectly well members take advantage of that before meetings. But my duty is to ensure that this council can operate. I do understand the point you're making. I understand the frustrations, but we are where we are, and the view I've taken stands. Now, Chair, I think that's been raised as a point of order, I think, rather than a debate. So I can see Councillor Hughes has wanted to come in just to assist.
No,
At the meeting, that's the point of minutes, and I don't think this is relevant to it. I would appreciate it if we could go to the vote, please.
Yeah, I've given you the chance to ask that question and give your reasons for you not voting, but we will go to the vote now, please, with a show of hands. So all in favour of the minutes, please show of hands. Is he there? Yeah. Against? And abstentions? Thank you. Just before we carry on, can we just, it's my fault because I didn't mention it at the beginning, when we do the voting, obviously we're doing the show of hands, if we could just keep our hands up a little bit longer, and so that the clerk can actually take note of the votes. Many thanks. Okay, item 4 is...
Hello?
Right, sorry.
The concern that I have about Mr. McLaughlin's reply is that often we want our questions to be answered in public, because and not just
right,
to be
okay,
provided
I'm
with
quite aware of all that, and I think what was actually said, These questions are for the benefit of getting through, but I don't feel that this is to the benefit of the whole of the district residents. We need to get the business done.
Can I just...
No, I'm
Sue,
not
can
going
I just
to carry
continue?
on. No,
Because
sorry, we'll carry on with questioning. No,
Sue,
I'm
I
sorry.
haven't quite finished
No,
my point of order.
no. Item 4. On your agenda, it is the members to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests if they have any on any of the business. Does anybody have any? Councillor Wakeman.
I have a property with the Derbyshire clause on, so I've got an interest in item 12.
Thank you. Councillor Froggatt.
Yeah, same here, Chair. My house has the Derbyshire clause on, so I will be leaving the room for that debate.
I'm going to declare an interest on item 11, the Black's Head, due to the fact that it's a personal interest because I'm actually on the town council, but I will be staying and being involved with any debate. Anybody else wishing to declare anything? No, thank you. Right. Item 5, leaders' announcements, please. So I call on Mr Purdy. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I recently attended the District Council Network Conference when I had the opportunity to question Housing Minister Christopher Pincher MP with regard to the lack of new and affordable homes being built in the Peak Park. Whilst I have received a reply from the Housing Minister, he did not fully answer the point of my question. And so with thanks to Mike Hayes, we have set out a very detailed letter on the subject matter and now wait a further response. I will advise Council when that response comes in. I fully appreciate the special purpose of the Peak Park Authority to keep and beautify the Peak District area, but it is falling behind other national parks with its building programme, and sustainability is key to keeping the park alive. Due to the fact that Derbyshire was successful in only 2 bids for government grant monies out of 14 applications, I've written today to the LMHCLG Secretary of State, Minister Michael Gove MP, to ask the question as to why our bids were not successful. And in addition, I am also stating the case for a really decent settlement for our authority, given the fact that there is no clear evidence in the recent Chancellor's budget statement, and finally outlining 2 years of collaborative work by Derbyshire local authorities on Vision Derbyshire, and the hope it will be successful in our county bid. 2 weeks ago, I received a telephone call from James Jameson, Chairman of the Local Government Association, who wished to know how things were in our area. I was able to inform James of the troubles we are experiencing with our Serco contract, the concern I have with regard to a fair and decent settlement for our authority, given the 10 years and more of austerity cuts which have badly affected our authority, to the point where our hard-pressed officers are as concerned as I am, together with the Chief Executive, on the lack of officer capacity to be able to put together a shovel-ready Green Book case for the second round, tranche 2 of Levelling Up Fund monies, which we expect to be announced in the spring. Members ought to really take notice of this point I'm making now, that the lack of officer capacity is threatening any bid we might make to government under the Levelling Up Fund round of grants. I then touched upon Vision Derbyshire with James, and that after 2 years of hard work by Derbyshire County Council officers and the close collaboration of Derbyshire local authorities during this time, that we were ever hopeful that government would approve our county deal. James replied that he was fully behind the idea of county deals and hoped to see one get over the line and approved. I'm now able to report, Madam Chairman, that Councillor Barry Lewis has informed me that he has been invited to speak to ministers in London with regard to our county deal bid, and is taking 3 members of the Vision Derbyshire with him to London. We keep our fingers crossed. Other counties are following our idea on Vision Derbyshire, but we are 2 years ahead of the rest of them with this hard work. And so, as I say, we remain ever hopeful that we can seal a joint committee. Thank you, Chairman.
To members.
I always provide it to the clerk, Councillor Ratcliffe, and certainly I'll let the clerk have it for circulation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Item 6, to receive announcements from the Civic Chair of District. So, Councillor Wayne.
Thank you, Chair. On the 12th of November 2021, I attended a luncheon at the Museum of Making in Derby with the Lord Lieutenant, who presented the Queen's Enterprise Award for International Trade to a company called Master Mover from Ashbourne. Around 100 staff and their families attended this event. This is a highly prestigious award, and it was a pleasure to see it to be awarded to a local Derbyshire Dales company that only started in 1997. I had a good conversation with both directors, and I sought whether or not they would be able to pass on their expertise and to other, sort of start-up businesses. And hopefully, I'm going to meet them again, and I will report back to Mr. Capes and also the Derbyshire County Council if we're able to stimulate some sort of skill sets from that company. Thank you very much.
Item 7, to receive the minutes of the committees held since the last council meeting. Those being from the Council, Planning, Licence and Appeals, Community Environment and Governance and Resources. Do I find a mover for those minutes? Councillor Donnelly and Councillor Atkin, thank you. Councillor Swindle, sorry. Right, oh, sorry, beg your pardon. So they've been moved and seconded. All in favour? Please keep your hands up until we give you the nod. Thank you. Against? And abstentions? Yeah. Okay, that motion's carried. Thank you. Item 8. Item 8 is to consider the revised corporate peer action plan. So I'll introduce Paul Wilson to do the report.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Members will recall the Corporate Peer Challenge, which was undertaken towards the back end of 2019. And members also may recall the fact that you approved an action plan in July of 2020, and that action plan is included in the report at Appendix 1 in its original form. Regrettably, due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic during the last 18 months, some of the actions within that action plan have not been capable of being implemented. So what you have before you at Appendix 2 is a summary of the actions which have been implemented, and then at Appendix 3 you have a revised action plan of all the actions that are outstanding to be completed and the timescale for their completion. I think it's important to remember that this isn't the only action plan that officers are working to. We clearly have the corporate plan and the service plan actions, and we also have day-to-day service delivery. So in formulating the revised action plan at Appendix 3, we have had to have regard to our other corporate commitments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm happy to move this, Chair. I've just said in my leader's announcement the fact of the strains on our officers. But I want to remind members of the 2 independent peer reviews that have taken place this last, 8-9 years, the last one in 2019, when it stated what an excellent council this is. And that's not down to me as leader, that's down to our officers, and they need to take the credit. And it's not the first time, because the previous peer independent review said the same. And therefore you have a steady norm of the work that our officers do. But they are under strain, and the pandemic has added to that. So I think hopefully members will recognise the hard work that our officers put in, the extra hours they work at home in the evening and at weekends, and that without them, we wouldn't have got as far with this revised action plan as is presented before you. So I commend this and move the recommendations, Chair.
Find a seconder. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second the report from Paul Wilson. It has been a very difficult time, working through the pandemic. What I would like to make a plea for is, we thank the team for all the hard work they've done, it's actually a really small team, and they're working extremely hard. Councillor Purdy and myself have weekly meetings via Zoom with Paul Wilson, and it's a fact that some members of this authority put an awful lot of pressure on our members of staff. Yes, they're there to answer questions, but could I just ask for a little bit of patience? If you do need to telephone or email, do not expect an answer straight away. As it says quite rightly in there, an awful lot of work is going on, as well as the day-to-day service. Thank you.
Thank you. I can just note for the clerk of the arrival of Councillor Shirley. Thank you. But at this point in time, he will not take any part in this item of debate. Thank you. Councillor Allison, Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I've just got a question actually about key recommendation 6. There's reference there to develop a succession plan for political groups to use to invest in promoting talent within the group system. At the very first members, and it's actually an action for the members development working group, at that very first group, the chair of that group, Councillor Atkin, said that wasn't a matter for that group to work on. So can I ask why it's still in there?
Yes, Chair. Well, it's still in there because it is one of the outstanding actions. If members decide that it's not an action that they wish to take forward, then clearly you do have the ability to take it out of this version of the action plan.
Councillor Atkin decided it wasn't something for the group to work on.
It's a decision for members to decide as to whether you want that action carrying forward.
Councillor Ratcliffe, please.
Two comments, if I may, Paul, to you, but they are formed as questions in a sense. The first one, I hope you'll agree with me that at the time of the peer challenge, which is probably some 2 years ago, I felt the theme, the very strong feedback was that we should sing out with greater clarity and voice our achievements, but seek to do it in a corporate way, which is why, of course, we brought our corporate plan about with that line, one council, one voice. Now, it seems to me, and I hope I'm not being either perverse or overly pessimistic, this council has been suffering some fragmentation. I don't feel that we have that unity that we used to have, and it seems to me that on your key recommendation about the strong narrative and indeed your proposed action of guiding members to think corporately, we need to somehow have a strong foundation for that. And one of the essential elements of that, to my mind, is having a constitution that we can all subscribe to. Now, I'm a member of that committee, and I have recently said to James that this really needs to be a priority action now. We need to have a document that is definitive and signed up to by all members, so there is no disagreements. Everybody knows what the protocol, what the procedures are. This this element that I'm describing, of course, is taking place not just at council, but we're experiencing it at committees too. If we're going to fully adopt the recommendations here, I think we need to have this in place. My second point is a somewhat broader comment. And again, I hope you will agree with me that the use of our influence on D2, N2 boards, the Peak District Park and the County Council, are eminently valuable. But what we need to do, in my opinion, is to maintain our independence, our local government independence. I'm getting the impression that the more collective partnership that was advanced under this proposal for Vision Derbyshire is actually not going to come about. In which case, it seems to me that if we're not careful, we are going to be merely a second-tier arm of government carrying out their wishes rather than subscribing to that which we want to advance for our own local communities and Derbyshire Dales. So I think we've got to be very careful there, and I'd like to see us taking this on board and developing something that we can all, again, subscribe to. It's part of this being proud to be a member of Derbyshire Dales District Council, as opposed to being somehow aligned to something which is really not having the influence that I think we should be voicing. So I just wanted to make those two comments. But I'd be pleased to hear what you might have to say in response.
Thank you, Chair. I think your comment, Councillor Ratcliffe, about a unified council is really important, because irrespective of what role we play, whether we're members or officers, we all are here for one core reason, and that's to do the very best that we can for the residents that rely upon us to deliver the services day to day. And irrespective of debates in council, we should all be striving for, and I know that we do, we should all be striving for to make the very best decisions that we can for them. And I think the issue regarding the Constitution is a point very well made, and the reason why James has suggested the formulation of the Constitution Working Group is because I think already this evening we've identified the fact that the Constitution isn't working for us. It needs to work better for us as a council, it needs to work better for you as members, and that's the forum to bring about the change. So I very much embrace what you are saying. I wholly agree with what you're saying, and I know that James does as well. And by bringing about that change, hopefully we will also bring about a more unified council if members feel that it's not as unified as it clearly needs to be or may have been in the past. In terms of Vision Derbyshire, clearly we have made commitments to Vision Derbyshire, but I think there is a limit to the extent of our commitment, because members have made it very clear that we want to retain our own sovereignty. And I think the challenge for Vision Derbyshire moving forwards, not just for the Derbyshire Dales, is but how can the individual districts and boroughs maintain that sovereignty? Because everybody's of the same view, whilst also delivering the impact that Vision Derbyshire could deliver in terms of having that single voice with government. So we are seeking to try and get the benefits of both, and I'm very much aware of that in all the discussions that I take part in at Vision Derbyshire level, and Derbyshire Dales will always be my number one priority, clearly, as it is yours, and hopefully we can get the best of both worlds.
Thank you.
I've got Councillor Gamble, Councillor Wayne, Councillor Slack, Councillor Raw, and I shall bring Councillor Purdy back in on the right to reply for the proposal. So I'll move to Councillor Gamble next, please.
A couple of questions on this. Point 3, more emphasis on different ways of working, engaging with our communities, understanding local needs and wants. How do you think that's going, considering that only last week a local group who was involved in something on its community wasn't invited to a key meeting to actually discuss the progression of that, namely the allotments in Stoke Homes. Also, only this morning I've received an email from a group of residents around the Enthovens development who for the second time have requested to have more community involvement in something that was decided at planning committee, which is why I didn't vote for that sort of minutes through, because I don't think that reflects really what was said at the time. So if you can answer that, please, how much do you think we'll actually start listening to our communities rather than just deciding things for them and quite often ignoring them? Commercialisation decisions now mainstreamed into policy committees. How do you envisage that actually happening? How will that actually, if you can give me an example of what that would happen. I know you'll give me the Bakewell Road development, but generally, obviously, that was an officer-led thing. If members, say, want to feed into commercialism, particularly if members aren't on any of the policy committees, how do they go about that? Reinforcing corporate priorities. Can you tell me exactly how a bush ride achieves that, please? Again, and on point 6, creating a forum for ideas and initiatives from all councillors that can then be assessed against the corporate plan. Who does that assessing and who gets the input into that? That's it.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of engaging communities, clearly that is an ongoing activity that the Council has to undertake as part of its normal service delivery. And whilst there may well be examples where you feel that we've not engaged the communities in the manner in which you would hope or we should moving forward, again, I think that's a reflection upon the policies and procedures that we have and adopt as a Council. And if they don't work for us, then we should review them and change them as necessary. In terms of the commercialisation issue, the decision was made by Council to mainstream that within the policy committees, and you make reference, Councillor Gamble, to the Bakewell Road project as being officer-led. It wasn't actually officer-led because there's been extensive involvement with the local community through Matlock Community Vision, through the Matlock Ward members. It was a decision that this Council made. It's the biggest single capital investment this Council has made since we built the Arc Leisure Centre. So it's not an officer-led project, it's a council-led project. And that will start to deliver commercial benefits to this council once it's implemented in the years to come. That was the whole rationale of the business case. And in terms of the corporate priorities, clearly we do have a corporate plan that drives all of our corporate activities. And as you'll see on the agenda later this evening, there is a report updating members on the success towards the achievement of those corporate plan priorities. So again, it's a discussion and a debate that we will have on a very regular basis to determine how successful this council is achieving what it set out to achieve back in 2019.
So in future, if a member wanted to do something towards commercialisation, how would they, and they weren't on any of the policy committees, how would they go about it?
If there are commercial opportunities that members wish to discuss, then the way to do that will be to raise it through myself or one of the service directors, and we have a way of looking at the business case for a particular proposition. And if it is felt that that is something that the council would wish to consider, then we'll bring it through the policy committee for consideration.
Also, just as further than that, then talk about the businesses.
Well, I think
as usual, I don't get to ask a question. Thank you.
You've coming back. Councillor Wayne, you wish to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at that sign on the wall. Be the best you can. That's what we're trying to get our young people to be. That's what schools are teaching them to be. And that is what this council has to be. Everybody in this council has got to work together. Everybody's got to pull together. I'd just like to come back on the Deputy Leader's comment about certain people wanting to ask questions. When I first became a councillor, that is what I wanted to do for my community. I wanted to put their points of view forward, and if that required to take a little bit of time, that's what I wanted to do. I'll just raise this issue now that point 5 on page 19 of the plan. This is to do with the community forums, which haven't been held for some time. I understand there's COVID issues. But the question I want to ask Mr. Wilson is, I've been here for 2 years, and certain people have been on these committees, Peak Park or Sheffield or D2N2 and all these committees, but never once have I seen a report forthcoming from any of those committees. Now, what I'd like to see is the people that are on those committees, when they go to the committees, they proffer up a report so we can be one council and we can all be the best that you can. That's what I want to see. What can you do to reassure me that that is going to happen? Thank you.
Chairman, that is an issue which has been raised on previous occasions. It is something that the monitoring officer has picked up on, and again, that will be dealt with through the Constitution Working Group.
They just come back very fleetingly. So have we got to wait until the next annual meeting in 2022 before people that attend these meetings decide they're going to send reports? Or will the leader make sure that the people who are on these committees send reports in and we can all have a look at them so we can be one council? Thank you.
Councillor Slack, you wish to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Paul for all the work that his team has put into this peer challenge, Chair. I've been on the council quite a while, and this last few years I've felt that there's been quite a gap forming between us. We used to be more united than we are today. Unfortunately, different issues have cropped up, same as Councillor Ratcliffe has mentioned. One of the issues is Vision Derbyshire, which I'm very concerned about. That, like Councillor Ratcliffe, I think we're going to divide and be sectioned off. Derbyshire Dales is only a little authority, and if we get with some of the bigger authorities, we're going to be pushed to the back. I'm sure of that. It's better to be independent. We can do better for our residents, and that's what I was elected for. Same as Councillor Wayne said, that's what we are elected for, to do the best we can for our residents. On item 6, it says that we should put district before ward. I think we're all guilty of putting ward before district. We all go for residents of our ward and do the very best we can for residents of ward. I do appreciate that we have to come together as a district, but we aren't quite doing that at the moment. We're not gelling together. I know Mr. Wilson is aiming to do that and bring us closer together, and I wish we could get closer together, but I think there's more work got to be done by lots and lots of us to get closer together on lots of issues. I think we've got to have a common purpose on many issues. Some issues are put in front of us which, out of the blue, we should have more input and have more togetherness in what we decided. So I am a little bit perturbed about this, and I would like to see us coming closer together and having the issues which are very controversial should be discussed before any decisions are put forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
Chair, just to respond to Councillor Slack, I think we all perhaps have to ask the question why we're not closer together. Because we all have a part to play. It's not something I can do alone. It's not something the corporate leadership team can do alone. We all have a part to play. We are all the council. So, whatever it will take to bring the council closer together, if indeed that's what members feel is necessary, then that is a conversation we should all be engaged in. And that is certainly a conversation I'm very interested in having with any member. I think in terms of Vision Derbyshire, without opening up that particular debate, the only point I would make is that where authorities have worked collaboratively together, such as in the West Midlands, the amount of investment which government is putting into those areas significantly outstrips that which is coming to the East Midlands. And that is the point of Vision Derbyshire, because we want to have that voice and we want to get that investment, because that is investment which then goes to help our residents. So that's what Vision Derbyshire is really all about. It's not about some sort of super council. It's about having that single voice at the table when you're bidding for serious money for your local areas. That's what it should be about.
That's correct, because... Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Rowe, please.
Ask a bit about the corporate plan going forward for 22-23. I've noted that there's, in the last box, the proposed priority and action areas don't have timescales generally added to them. There's one timescale within 27 actions, and I'm just wondering why we haven't got any timescales you know, on delivering a permanent site to identify travellers' needs, for example, why we haven't got a timescale on when we're going to do that by.
Councillor Rowe, can I just ask, are you talking about the corporate plan?
Yes.
Or this corporate
plan.
peer challenge?
The corporate plan, I thought it was all being done.
No,
under one.
sorry.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Burford.
I hadn't actually intended to speak on this one, but I did want to just follow up on the excellent points that Councillor Wayne made. I do hope that all members actually agree that it shouldn't be seen as unacceptable by members to ask relevant questions of officers. And I'd also like to say that in terms of it has been mentioned about the Bakewell Road development, I do need to point out that the 6 Matlock Ward members were consulted and involved at every stage of this proposed development. And just to point out as well that it was a community initiative involving Matlock Community Vision and the Civic Association. But Giles and Steve, I have to say publicly that we really, as ward members, did appreciate the involvement that you gave us. So thank you.
Is there anybody else wishing to speak with this? Mr. Burford, Councillor Burford.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm just following on from what Sue just said. I agree with her 100%, and of course, and Steve Wayne as well, when he talked about, and Councillor Gamble, about involving the community more. I do look forward to community forums being re-established on this council, or some variation of that. Some of them weren't very successful, but if the Constitutional Working Group can consider how best to involve the public in question time sessions and so on, that would be very beneficial. But the other thing I agree with Councillor Wayne about is all the organisations at the annual meeting that we elect 95% Conservative members to represent us on, we don't get reports back from them. It's not just the Peak Park and one or two others. It's probably 2 pages of organisations where various members of the controlling group are representatives for us on, and we don't get reports back from them at all, as far as I'm aware. So I think that's something that should be considered as well.
I'm going to move back to Councillor Purdy as you moved.
Thank you, Chair. It was in relation to what Councillor Ratcliffe said. Vision Derbyshire, as the Chief Executive has said, Mike, is all embracing and keeping sovereignty. It's not to get rid of any district or borough, and that's the whole reason for Vision Derbyshire, is to keep us together. And I remember one of the Area councillors saying, I'm not really for Vision Derbyshire because I want to keep the logos on my dustbin lorries. I couldn't understand where he was coming from on that, because that's what it's all about. We have a planned workshop for New Year to help members get to know more about Vision Derbyshire. And there are some things that have been said tonight that I think really I just have to remind the group leaders of the 2 meetings that the Chief Exec held, was it in the first year in lockdown, to try and appeal for better relations. So it's not just a new thing. It started with this new term. I think we probably ought to have another leaders advisory group meeting and thrash it out again and let things come out, what's been causing the problems. I do accept that members on committee should report back. I accept that, and I'll take some steps to address that. I'm not going to say anything more, Chair, because otherwise I might say too much. Thank you.
So it's been moved and seconded. So I'd like to go to the vote. All in favour of the... Against? Abstentions? That motion's carried, thank you. Moving on to item 9, membership of the political groups and political balance. I'll bring in James for this.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this report has been updated since the report that was on your agenda for the previous meeting. The recommendations probably summarise exactly what the situation is. So the membership for the Labour group is now altered. It was previously 4 members, it is now 3. There is now a new political group in operation, which is known as the Independent Group, consisting of 2 members. And following notification of that, I've undertaken a review of the political balance, which is set out within the report. Council will need to agree the nominations of the groups to their entitlements on the committees of the Council. That part of the report, I think, or hope, is relatively straightforward. There's an additional recommendation there that Councillor Purdy replace Councillor Bull as a member of the Constitution Working Group. And I've received notice today, and I'd be grateful if Council could consider this recommendation rather than me bringing a further report to a future meeting, that Councillor Atkin replace Councillor Purdy on the Derbyshire Police and Crime Panel. Councillor Purdy may wish to speak to that, or Councillor Atkin may wish to speak to that in the debate, but I've had notification of that through. So with your agreement, Chair, I'd like to add that additional recommendation if members are willing to accept it. As I say, the report is relatively straightforward. The nominations to seats are set out in the report, so I don't think I have anything further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Froggatt.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to move this report. It's something that we've had to do through no fault of anyone's, so it is what it is, and I move this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does that find a seconder? Councillor Bright.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a personal comment in respect of this report, though of course clearly I will be voting for it. I'd also like to read out a personal statement from Councillor O'Brien, if you'll allow me, Chair, because I think it is certainly it should be given a public airing, as it were. Peter O'Brien, despite what has happened, is a very valuable member of this council. He may have perceived idiosyncrasies, but this council benefits from his membership at all levels. He's a very conscientious and committed member of the council and a diligent and hard-working constituency representative. Clearly, I'm sorry this has happened, and it came on the heels, of course, from another tragic event that still I find extremely distressing. That was the loss of my colleague of a few years, Councillor Joyce Pawley, and incidentally I went down to Matlock Bath, and along with Councillor Slack we paid our tributes, silent tributes to Joyce sitting in the arbour there, and I recommend anyone just to go down and have a look at that. This is from Councillor O'Brien himself. In July this year, I was informed by the Labour Party that I had been excluded, to use their terminology. My alleged crime was to have supported another party, the Liberal Democrats, in the May County Council elections. With due respect to my Lib Dem friends and colleagues here this evening, this is a laughable accusation, as all those who know me, and I'm sure Councillor Alistair Sutton will testify. I have been a member of the Labour Party since 1976. Social justice, equality of opportunity and care for the environment are what I am about. I was elected by the residents of Abney, Eam, Grindleford and Hathersage as their Labour representative on this council, and I will continue to represent them to the best of my ability. Labels are not important. I hope to rejoin my party at the earliest opportunity. But in the meantime, I look forward to working with Councillor Colin Swindle to further the best interests of this council and this district. Colin will lead our group, and I know will operate on the principle of cooperation, not confrontation. Others are welcome to join us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Ratcliffe. Councillor Gamble.
A question really about point 5. Why Councillor Purdy is replacing Councillor Bull? We've had talk about how this council now is going to work together and it's not going to be political. It's just interesting, isn't it? At the first meeting of the Constitution Working Group, where Councillor Bull was instrumental in helping, in suggesting Mike Ratcliffe as the chairman, and now she's gone.
I'd like to reply for that one, thank you. It is the fact that, as you'll know, I wasn't at meeting, the October meeting due to my husband having COVID. I did develop COVID, but not to the extent that he did. He has got other health issues, and I have work commitments. I'm on every committee, which is C&E, G&R, planning, and obviously full council. So I just felt that I asked Councillor Purdy if I could step away from being involved, and that's one of the reasons why.
I'm pleased it's your decision.
Thank you.
Chair, if I may.
Councillor Purdy.
Chair, if there's any question as to why there's no cohesion and good relationships in this council, these stinging attacks don't help. I offered you several weeks ago, Councillor Gamble, a meeting to discuss issues. You didn't even give me the decency of a reply. Weeks ago, I've got the email still. It was because of the ill health of the book. It was the ill health of Councillors Sue Bull and Steve Bull and the pressures they've got on their business that I was approached. So it's absolutely nothing to do with all of what you just asserted. Thank you, Chair.
It has been moved and seconded, obviously with the item 6. So everybody is clear to the fact of item 6 within it. Does it want repeating? Can we just repeat this? Thank you.
I'm happy to just repeat that recommendation just for absolute clarity. The recommendation is that Councillor Atkin replace Councillor Purdy as the Council's representative on the Derbyshire Police and Crime Panel.
It will help.
I don't believe we need one. Thank you. I'm going straight to the vote then. All in favour? Against? Abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. Item 10, dispensation for non-attendance at council meetings. James, bring you in again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this should be a relatively straightforward report. A request has been received from Councillor Lewis Rose for a dispensation from attending council meetings for a period of 6 months, commencing from tomorrow. Councillor Rose has given indication he's not able to attend meetings at the moment and would like to take the opportunity to have a dispensation to avoid being disqualified from holding office, which would take effect in January, given his previous attendance at Community Environment Committee. Council, you've previously made decisions along these lines. Even in this term of the Council, I don't think this is anything controversial in terms of procedure, so I'm happy to answer any questions around procedure. I would ask members to be mindful of the data protection implications of any questions that they ask, given that it does relate to an individual. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hobson.
Recommendation for dispensation for non-attendance for Councillor Rose. I don't think we need to say any more. Thank you.
Does that find Councillor Atkin?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I'm quite happy to second that. As Councillor Hobson so rightly said, it's a private matter, we should allow Councillor Rose dispensation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to ask a personal question, but can I ask whether he will be fit to return during the period of this council?
Chair, I can't answer that question. What I can say is that Councillor Rose could decide to turn up to the next meeting in 2 days' time, in which case the dispensation would fall. That procedurally, that's not a consideration for us in making this decision. The request has been received. You are being asked to approve that dispensation. The etiquette around this kind of thing when these requests are made is that they tend to be looked upon with a degree of compassion, given the circumstances that have been set out. People don't make requests for dispensations for no reason. If it was like some famous cases that have been reported recently where a councillor in Cambridge was representing a ward in Cambridge from another part of the world, that would be a different issue. But I think on this case, I can't go into the detail of this case, as you'll appreciate, but I'm not qualified to give a view as to whether Councillor Rose will return or not. That's a matter for him.
Thank you.
I have a comeback.
Sorry, well, I haven't given you a comeback. I'm sorry. I think your question has been answered to the fact that it can't be fully answered. Councillor Martin Burford, thank you.
Okay, I would echo what other members have said in terms of Councillor Rose. I wish him all the best in the future in terms of his personal health. But I'm more concerned in a way for the residents of Hogneston, Brassington, Carsington, etc., who don't have a representative now on this council, haven't done for some time in terms of effective representation. I think if one of the 3 members in All Saints Ward in Matlock, or 2 of us say out of the 3, have this problem, then I think...
Sorry. So the point of order, please. When we've granted dispensations before, we've not discussed the representation in various wards.
Well, forget it then. We won't bother asking any more questions.
I'm just saying.
Don't bother. This council's a waste of time.
Excuse, just...
You've had the point of order. Councillor Burford's finished. Councillor Hughes, I think, is trying to make... Are you trying to make a point of order, Councillor Hughes? Or are you... No, I'm not. I want to speak. Right. I want to speak in debate. And I've been told I'm not allowed to speak in debate. I'll bring it back.
Which I could have spoken at.
Asked a question. I will come back to you, okay? So can we just leave it at that for a second? I'll just move on to the next person. But we don't want to be going into any more personal issues
I'm not going to go
or
into
anything
any
else.
personal
Councillor
detail.
Wayne. I'm sorry, but... Just, can you wait, please? I've asked Councillor Wayne. I said I will bring you back. You've had one point of saying something. Councillor Wayne.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask a question? And it's not involving anything to do with any personal details at all, but how will the constituents within that area be informed.
I think that's what already's been taken
Well,
on
I've had
board.
an answer, that's all I'm asking, Chair.
I do feel that obviously this is a dispensation, and obviously I would have thought it's down to the political group that he's from, is to look into that.
Well, can I just have that as an
Right,
answer
okay,
then, please? Thank you.
Councillor Purdy, would you like to bring that?
I would, Chair, because I need to correct an incorrect statement, Councillor Burfield. I need to correct you with an incorrect statement. Councillor Rose's ward has been looked after since it was evident that he's not been able to attend meetings for some months now. He's not been well since the elections of May 2019. He's attended 1 or 2 meetings, as you are aware, but I arranged for Councillor Richard Fitzherbert and for Councillor Dermot Murphy to cover different sections of his ward. So the parish council chairs are well aware, and they also pick up the reports on planning committee, and that arrangement will continue in the absence of Councillor Rose. And I think that Councillor Rose, who's given over 50 years of his life to this council, should be treated with at least some respect.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Councillor Purdy has more or less said what I was wanting to say. That you might find this perhaps slightly perverse coming from a committed Labour member and supporter, but Councillor Rose has been a long time political adversary of mine, and I've always found him to be extremely caring, as it were, in terms of looking out for the best interests of this council. And I don't think we should overlook the huge debt of gratitude that we all owe him, because he was one of the founder members of this Derbyshire Dales, going back to the West Derbyshire Council, and he served it with dedication and commitment, as you quite rightly say, for nearly 50 years. And I find it almost bordering on the tragic, the position he's come down to. I think, though, as has been mentioned, there are perhaps things to be aware of, and no doubt they will arise. But if anyone deserves a respite, he does.
Councillor Swindle.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ratcliffe's sort of touched on the points that I wanted to, but I'm just incredibly saddened on this agenda item, the way it's gone, the way we're debating this. I understand there are legitimate concerns, how the ward will be looked after, the constituents' issues addressed. That I'm sure the Conservative group will have in hand, as will officers, and I'm sure they will all be taken care of, as they have been done for quite some time. But when we're looking at this agenda item, those issues will get dealt with, but this agenda item is about Councillor Rose requesting a dispensation. I'm just trying to look at it from a really human perspective. I don't know the circumstances. They're not my business. They're nobody else's business unless Councillor Rose has made it their business. But whether it's ill health, personal circumstance, or whatever, if it was me listening to this debate and I'd requested a dispensation, I'd be incredibly disheartened. I think the best thing we can do is grant this for Councillor Rose, that we send him our best wishes. We hope to see him back. And again, like Councillor Ratcliffe, when I was a member of the Labour Party and an independent member, I sparred with Councillor Rose, and I miss him on this council. He actually enjoyed it. He used to come to me before a meeting and say, I hope you're putting a question in next time, you've not done it this time, or, you know, hope you've got something to say on this one. He used to get bored with his huge majority of not actually being challenged and confronted at meetings. And he revelled in it. And we kind of missed that at council meetings. So I hope he will be back. And I'm sure his constituents, if they have issues of concern, will find a way to raise them. And I'm sure that they will want to give him the break that he obviously needs from his duties. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swindle. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo Councillor Ratcliffe and Councillor Swindle's views. I think Councillor Rose has been a tremendous... he loves Derbyshire Dales. He was Derbyshire Dales. And Councillor Rose was always someone you could go and speak to and get views. And I've crossed swords with him, as we do in politics. But I have great respect for Councillor Rose, and I'm very sad, like Colin has just said, I'm very sad the situation has developed, and I think we should give him our full respect for what he has achieved for Derbyshire Dales over many, many years. So I support the views of Councillor Ratcliffe and Councillor Swindle on this, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Sue Burford.
Again, I didn't really intend to speak on this, but I'm afraid I do have to, because it does sadden me that it's almost become an attack on any member who wants to actually ask a question and make a point. And I'm afraid, Chair, you seem to cut people off. Certain councillors seem to get cut off. You've got no idea what Martin was going to say. Previously, you've had no idea what Councillor Hughes was going to say, and Councillor Gamble, and they've been cut off. And that saddens me. And I have no problem at all with this recommendation for dispensation for Councillor Rose. I echo what people have said. We've obviously been adversaries politically, but it's the fact that people are being cut off when you do not know what they are going to say. And Martin referred to All Saints members. You cut him off. You did not know what he was going to say, and that saddens me more than anything.
Okay, well, I'm very sorry in that. It's questions all the time, I feel, within this, and that's part of the issue with it all. And I think we're trying to get on and move things along without all these long-winded questions. And as like we've said before, we thought something of this nature would be a pretty straightforward. It's not a debatable political issue. Right, I will come back to Councillor Hughes, as I said I would.
Oh, you've come back to me. Thank you. Thank you very much. I was cut off. I was stopped from speaking at the GNR meeting the other night because I was told erroneously that I was not allowed to speak at it. I've now been stopped at this meeting twice from speaking, and I think that is not fair to opposition councillors. So I would appreciate being able to make my points at some stage during a meeting. If I was Councillor Rose, at this stage, having not attended meetings regularly for 2.5 years, I would have resigned. That's all I wanted to say.
Then...
We've granted dispensation during this term to a member of this authority, and it's despicable the way we're...
Okay, thank you. Thank you, members. I don't think that comment was actually needed to be made. It has been moved and seconded. Sorry. I'm going to the vote.
They've given for Councillor Rose, and yet you still can't take...
Okay, thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's been said, I think, in not so many words tonight, but I'm going to actually say it again. Lewis Rose was Derbyshire Dales District Council for many, many years, devoted many years of service to the Dales. And I think as a matter of respect and in consideration of his devotion to this council, we should allow this application tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. All in favour for the dispensation? Thank you. Against? Thank you, members. Abstentions? That motion is carried. Thank you. I've lost my order of service now. Let's see. Okay, we move on to item 11. The Black's Head, Ashbourne. Thank you, Mr. Braun.
This report follows on from a report that was considered by Council in December of last year, which effectively asked officers to undertake a consultation on what should next happen with the Black's Head and with the sign on which it previously sat in Ashbourne. That consultation was undertaken, and the results of that are listed, or actually replicated, in the table that's included in paragraph 2.1. Following the closure of that consultation, a number of other comments were received, and those are replicated again in the table that's included at paragraph 2.3. This report was on the agenda for the July meeting of Council, so hopefully members are quite well aware of what it says. The one significant addition to it since then has been the request from Ashbourne Town Council that the sign and the head be transferred to them. What we're hoping to achieve out of the report tonight is a positive recommendation as to what this council wants to do next with the head and with the sign, so that officers can proceed to take the action that council decides. Again, it's worth me saying, I think that members must remember that the sign and the head are listed, they're grade 2 star listed structures, and whatever is decided to be done with them, a positive decision hopefully, will be subject to the approval of Historic England. Now, if the sign were to be transferred to Ashbourne Town Council, it's the belief of officers that an application would actually be made to the District Council for listed building consent, and the District Council would then consult with Historic England, just so that members are fully aware of that. If, on the other hand, this council decides to retain ownership of the head and sign, this council can't decide its own application, so it would need to make that application to Historic England direct. I hope that makes the purpose of the report clear, and I hope we can get some instructions as to what we're meant to be doing with it.
Thank you. Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to put forward the following motion regarding the Black's Head and the gantry sign.
Right, what I'm going to do from now on in, because this has been on agendas before, and questions and the likes, this is another, it is another motion, and what, sorry.
Chair, it's a point of order, so it's a procedural point that Councillor Burton's making. If I can just confirm that there's no provision in writing, or no provision in the Constitution for motions or any proposal to be set out in writing. You'll remember when at Worksworth, the unfortunate incident where I couldn't read Councillor Hughes' writing when we were trying to deal with an issue on that occasion. So it's not a breach of the procedures for a motion to be proposed. You have a report in front of you. There isn't a recommendation on the table as such. Council will have to consider a recommendation, so it is in line with procedure for a proposal to be put forward.
Well, would it be possible for us to sit here and write down this motion that you're going to propose and then have 5 minutes to think about it? Because otherwise we're trying to think on our feet.
Right, I believe there are copies.
Well, we've not had them.
Motion.
How long have I known about the motion? I get consulted on motions by various groups before meetings. This one, I knew about it today. But it's not for me to disclose that I've received the motion. It's for the members who are going to propose the motion to propose the motion.
If we've got a copy, can it be handed out to all members, please?
Last too long. That side could have put this motion in before. They didn't.
It's probably been worded wrong. It's been worded wrong as regards it being a motion.
It's a proposal. It's a proposal. I don't know, I'm not dealing with a sort of licensing application for insurance.
Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, members, members,
Thank you. Thank you.
members, I'd be grateful if you could just bear with me 1 second, please. The words describing this as a motion isn't correct. It is a proposal. It's not a motion that you have to give notice of. This is in compliance with the rules of procedure, that you can move a proposal from the floor in respect of reports. A motion, a proposal, whatever you want to call it, we could get pedantic about it, but it is still the same
You
thing.
always get pedantic when this side tries to ever put anything forward. I've seen meetings where people have been trying to do something and you always say no.
Adjourn this meeting, and if we cannot carry on, you've got 5 minutes. We will adjourn this meeting for 5 minutes to read the proposal in front of you, and we will resume. Right. Where's the other piece of paper? Have you got your watch out? Your stopwatch? Yeah. Because that's how I'll mention it first before we go. Right, thank you, everybody. Just before we carry on with this, as regards how we're going to continue the evening on the items, we will have the report, seek a proposal, and then go to debate. Within that debate, of which you will all speak, if there is a question within it, it will be permitted and an answer be given if there is one appropriate to be given. Okay? So that's where we're at with the continuation of this meeting. What I've just said, I said you can have the questions within your debate time. Okay, thank you. So hopefully we can get on with things. Right, item 11, Black's Head, Ashbourne. Councillor Lees, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I may carry on, with my recommendation, if you'd like to be called a recommendation, is as per recommendations 1 and 2, plus the following, which has now been passed round, which I will read out. It is in 5 sections. Item 1, that following receipt of the request from Ashbourne Town Council made during their meeting held on the 16th of November 2021 and submitted in writing to the Director of Regulatory Services, the full ownership and responsibilities for the Black's Head and the Greenman and Black's Head Royal Hotel gantry sign be transferred to Ashbourne Town Council. 2, that Ashbourne Town Council be advised to apply through the District Council for listed building consent to ascertain where the head can legally be displayed and carry out any maintenance and repairs, repainting work to the sign. 3, that the costs of any maintenance and repainting work to be met by the District Council until the transfer of ownership is complete, after which Ashbourne Town Council will be responsible for meeting any and all costs associated with the Black's Head. 4, that the Black's Head remains in possession of the Derbyshire County Archive until consent is given on behalf of the Secretary of State and the completion of the legal documents required for the transfer of ownership. 5, that authority be delegated to the Director of Regulatory Services and the Director of Corporate and Customer Services to undertake the actions required to progress the above decisions on behalf of the Council. And may I reserve the right to come back later on in debate if required. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm happy to second that the proposal. I think it's a very simple answer. It's as simple as this. Is the District Council going to transfer the ownership to Ashbourne Town Council? If the answer is yes or no. Simple as that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm very happy to second that.
Councillor Hughes.
Right, okay. Before I have one or two things to say, but before I say anything at all, I'd just like to point out that James McLaughlin has allowed and supported the development of motions in meetings, and he did this on one associated with the Tansley Travellers site. I think it was earlier this year or late last year, I can't remember. So I think it's fair to say that he has allowed that sets a precedent, or is a precedent that it could be followed in this case. So I think there's reason.
Comments upon the proposal?
Not entirely. No, I think at this stage I won't.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Burford.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I was going to actually limit what I'd got to say to recommendation 1 that was in the original report, that is that Council determines the future siting of the Black's Head figure. But I need to really now, I think, respond to item 1 in the proposal by Councillor Lees and Councillor Donnelly. So it's the future siting of it that concerns me the most, and I don't think it's as simple as what Councillor Donnelly said. Certainly don't think that. As reported in the council meeting of the 2nd of July 2020, it was resolved that the council have a duty to address the legacy of colonialism, slavery and racism in all its forms. We can't ignore the fact that many people, including many, I presume not all, members of the BAME community and myself, deem the Black's Head to be a caricature, a racist and offensive artefact. And we cannot deny that certainly I would imagine most people of the black community consider that to be offensive. Now, I understand completely that history can't be erased or changed, but if the head was ever returned to its original location, or indeed any external or outside location on public display, then I feel very strongly that it would be damaging the reputation not only of Ashbourne, its council and its people, but it would be damaging the reputation of all those of us in the Derbyshire Dales. Councillor Archer, who unfortunately could not be tonight and couldn't be here tonight, and he's gutted about that, but he is head of a sixth form in Derby, and he's got a parents' evening, so there was no way you could get out of that. But his comment, and I quote, was that it would be insensitive to people of colour at best and racist at worst. Now, I totally agree with him about that. I'm strongly of the view, and I can't express how strongly I feel about this, that Derbyshire Dales must only cede ownership of the head to anybody really, but to Ashbourne Town Council, if it is displayed in an appropriate, secure place, open to view by the public, not in on an external artefact, I don't know, what should I say, building, plinth, anything. That would be so offensive. And I think, to be honest with you, that item 1 on this motion is sort of opening the floodgates, really, for Ashbourne Town Council to put it exactly where they want to put it. And it doesn't actually say you can't put it on the where it came from in St John's Street. I don't think as a council, or indeed Ashbourne Town Council, should be seen to be turning a blind eye to racism. We've got to learn lessons from what happened in the past and also what's happening at the moment. I mean, we all know about what's been going on at or alleged to be going on at Yorkshire Cricket Club. And, you know, we must bear that in mind. And so my view is that somehow we've got to have a covenant or something legal that says it cannot go back where it came from. It cannot be on display externally. It has got to be in something like a museum, or I understand there is a visitor information centre at Ashbourne Town Hall where people can go and have a look at it. They can have an explanation of what the history of it is, and they can make their own minds up about it. But I think if this motion or proposal that we've just had put in front of us was to go ahead, I think we would be destroying the reputation of ourselves and of this council.
Councillor Allison.
Okay, thank you. I've actually got a question, and it's regarding the quality impact assessment that's attached to the report, which is new information that's been added since it was last presented to the council. And it's regarding, I think Tim completed this. So Tim, you've highlighted that the relevance of the general equality duty is that we need to foster good relations between different groups. Are you, by highlighting that in this equality impact assessment, saying that wherever the Black's Head goes, and if it's displayed or if it's put back into its original position, it won't be fostering good community relations? And also, are the Ashbourne Town Council, are they also bound by the general equality duty? Will they have to complete an equality impact assessment around what they do with the Black's Head, wherever legally they propose to put it? I just want to make a general comment before you reply to me, Tim. You know, I personally find this very upsetting. I think there are people probably on the other side of the room who think I'm being woke or oversensitive. But it does make me feel uncomfortable. And I don't think anybody should have to feel like that. I think there are individuals in this room who have no understanding or comprehension of the type of barriers and just general resentment that people from certain communities have to put up with. And why would we, as a council, want to make people feel like that? I don't know. It's beyond my comprehension. I don't understand it. Everybody has the right to go wherever they want and not feel like they're being treated as some kind of second-class citizen. And I'm afraid that's what it feels like in the Derbyshire Dales if you come from a minority background. There are people, I think, in Ashbourne who want to let it be a white community. They don't want people from ethnic minorities in their communities. And we, as a council, and I'm including the officers in this because you have a quality duty to the people and residents of this area, you need to step up as well. Thank you.
Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In relation to the fostering of good relations, that's one of the aims of the equality duty. It's not something I've written, it's one of the aims of the duty itself. The purpose of the Equality Impact Assessment, the EIA, was to try and provide some way of objectively assessing what it was that Council felt was the problem with this particular issue, which is something which is quite difficult to do because it's about the possibility of causing offence, isn't it, and the impact that has on others. And I think that fostering of good relations is one of the aims of the equality duty that fits quite closely with this particular issue. In relation to Ashbourne Town Council and the equality duty, it's my belief that it applies to all public bodies. There might be others in the room, and I'm looking at Steve who's nodding, there might be others in the room who know better than me. Because Steve is nodding, I'm guessing that that is correct.
Yeah, they have equalities the same. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Number one, we own it. The District Council owns this effigy. Is that correct, Tim?
Yes.
Yes. So therefore, we've all got a view on this. We should all have a view. And Ashbourne Town Council should not have the only views on this. Same as Councillor Burfoot's put forward. This effigy was taken down unexpectedly by certain people in Ashbourne, and then it disappeared for a while, and then it suddenly turned up again. And it's that sort of thing. It's telling us straight away. There's a defensive attitude from some of the town councillors in Ashbourne. I don't trust Ashbourne Town Council to take care of this head. If this head suddenly appears in somewhere in Ashbourne, displayed, the caption underneath, who's going to put the caption underneath? Is it going to be a caption about a Middle Eastern gentleman donating it to Ashbourne? Come on now. It's totally racialist. This head's totally racialist, and we should stop it straight away. We should put it away in a proper museum and explain that the colonialism and racialism of the past allow this sort of thing to go off. I know a lot of Conservatives believe, that, like I do, that this thing went off and it shouldn't go off today. We see in the things at cricket clubs and a lot of sporting clubs, things happening which shouldn't be happening. We've got to stop this, and we've got to be responsible. If we allow it to go to Ashbourne and it's displayed with a caption of whatever they want to put up, I want no responsibility for that whatsoever. And this council will be really reprimanded for allowing that to happen. So I ask all members, whatever party you are, to look at this properly. This head is racialist. There's no doubt about it, and it's got to be put away in a proper museum out of the way and explain what it really is. And without a doubt, we've got to do this, and I won't have any responsibility for the council if they don't do this. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was worried about this item on the agenda tonight, and I can hear the passion from some of our colleagues. I'm a firm believer, and I support this proposal. I would like the head and the whole responsibility for the gantry to go back to Ashbourne. Now, as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing to say here that the head is actually going to be displayed back on the gantry. It's not been decided where it's going to be in Ashbourne. I'm sure that the council in Ashbourne and the other councillors from districts who live in Ashbourne will consider very, very thoroughly what they're going to do. I firmly believe that the people of Ashbourne should be asked what they would like to happen, not on the internet, and have a because we saw with petitions in the past that 86,000 people replied to that, and there isn't 86,000 people living in the Ashbourne and surrounding villages. I know it's a difficult subject for everybody, but I believe in local democracy. Let the people of Ashbourne and the town council decide. Thank you.
Councillor Gamble.
I'll start with a question. Didn't we make a decision at the last meeting that this head was not going to go back on the gallows, as it's called, not a gantry?
It's not a gallows. Can I carry on and revert you back?
It was always called the gallows
until this meeting. Well, it isn't a gallows. A gallows is somewhere where somebody's hung, and they've never been hung from there ever. It is a sign of a public house or two public houses. I think you'll find.
Is it my turn to speak, or is it yours,
well,
Councillor Bull?
I'm just correcting you upon what it's called. It's a gantry.
If it's not called a gallows, then why on the day, quite clearly on any YouTube footage, did we hear the joke, we're not going to hang it, are we? Oh, ha 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 ha. Do we need white hoods for this? Followed by laughter. I think that tells you what the people engaged in that act thought that head was. I think it tells you very clearly what they thought that head was. That's one of the most upsetting things I've ever heard in my life, and it was a disgrace. And for this council to be part of that by giving it back to a council which quite clearly, by the word in here, says can be legally displayed, but I think we all know where this is leading. They want to legally display it back on the gallows. And how are we able to undo a decision that we made, which we did make, that this head was not going to go back on its gallows? Because if this isn't displayed, it isn't displayed in a museum with an explanation, then it's doing nothing. It's just going back in and it's rubbing salt into the wounds. And for this council may give it to Ashbourne Town Council and say, oh yes, you've got a equality right. But if we pass it over, we don't pass our responsibility to foster good relations with the community, because this was an extremely divisive act. And we cannot, as a council, be part of that and carry that on.
Tim, can you relate some question out of that?
I'm not sure what the question was. I got
We made a decision already at last meeting, didn't we, that it wasn't going to go back on the gallows?
That is my belief. That is what council decided last time, yes.
So how do we undo that then? Because we've not got 6 months past, have we?
Well, I can't answer that. That's for council to decide. I'm here to try and present fact. This is for you to debate.
But how can we debate something that's impossible?
Councillor, do you want to carry it on any more? Sorry, Councillor Gamble. Any more comments?
I'd like an answer from James as to how we can undo a decision that was made less than 6 months ago.
Thank you, Councillor Gamble. So, Council's not bound by its previous decisions. It can change its mind. The rule in the Constitution about rescission of a decision is usually when a decision is rescinded within 6 months of the original decision. Just double checking the report, I believe that decision was made in December last year, so the council isn't bound or isn't forced to stick to it without the notice of a rescission. So in this case, council could make an alternative decision. Probably the best way to illustrate that is if a council makes a decision in 6 months before the election and an entirely new membership comes in, you can't fetter the discretion of the council. So you can revisit that question tonight if council is minded to do so. So procedurally it's sound, although I accept the point that you're making, that it doesn't feel appropriate having previously reached a position on it. So that's a matter for members to debate.
In that case, then, what we can do is ask the other councillors on the other side to examine their consciences, if they have confined them. And when they made this last decision last time, they said it wasn't going to go back up.
Just take the point.
Chair, I've sat here and kept quiet while Councillor Gamble, on 3 occasions this evening, has made up her mind what our thoughts are on this side of the chamber. I don't want to listen to it anymore. I've no problem if she wants to ask us what our thoughts are, but I don't think there's any reason why she should sit there and cast negative aspersions on any member on this side of the House. Please, could you ask it to stop?
Can you stop casting aspersions upon anybody within the council?
I was actually talking about the events of the evening. I didn't realise everyone was there. Sorry.
Okay.
I wasn't there.
Right. Councillor Raw.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Raw.
Thank you. This issue is quite close to my heart because this incident happened during the last election campaign for Parliament. This matter came up on the doorstep when I was campaigning in Ashbourne, and I talked to a lot of people in Ashbourne during that campaign, and I was really shocked with the level of racism within the Ashbourne community that was obviously evident on the doorstep as to reasons why they weren't supporting the alternatives to the Conservative government. During the campaign, I received a phone call, a very distressing phone call from a young woman of mixed race who had experienced bullying because of her ethnic origin, and was distraught and was having nightmares about the incident where the black head was removed. And I asked on her behalf and on the behalf of the young people of this country who will be visiting Ashbourne and do not want to see, I think they've made it plain
through the Black Lives Matter campaigns and their voice generally. They do not want to see any historic figures that relate to that period of Britain's history when we oppressed people from minority groups. And I ended up leaving the Labour Party because I didn't want to be in the forefront of politics. I received text messages of a threatening nature, appalling emails after that campaign, a lot of which were to do with my views that the black head should be removed. And I decided to take a quieter spot and try to keep my vocal voice down with my lovely colleagues here on the independent group. I wanted to take a bit of a back step from politics because I was so shocked by the abuse that I received by standing up to racism. And you might have recall that this council held a minute's silence when the Black Lives Matter campaign first came to a head and the awful incident happened in America. Gary agreed to that. We all stood up for Black Lives Matter, and I'm asking you tonight to stand up for Black Lives Matter. The two, in my view, are the same.
Point.
Okay, point taken.
Made.
Thank you. So this council as a whole, I'm hearing, does not stand up for Black Lives Matter, which saddens me. I think this is appalling. I think, you know, we'd sorted it. I didn't come to that meeting in July because it upsets me. And I'm here tonight and because it's too important. You know, how many black people have we spoke to in our consultation? How many young people have we spoken to? I'm totally against this motion, and I ask any of you who've any sort of heart for any black person visiting Ashbourne, they don't have to live there, that doesn't want to see colonial racism displayed in a public place, to not vote in favour of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Michelle Morley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite disappointed and saddened to hear from probably 4 members this evening about how this side of the House thinks. And I object very strongly to being, my opinion, being summated by yourselves. We're intelligent people, we're informed, and we do have hearts. But I will not be told what I'm thinking by any other member. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gretrix.
Following the consultation that's taken place regarding this item, I would like to read out the feedback from Derbyshire County Council, BME Employee Network Group, consisting of the black, minority and ethnic employees. Concerns I've raised regarding the Black Said sculpture, which we understand was taken down from St John Street, Ashbourne, last summer, following a petition for it to be removed. The BME group, along with wider members of the community who live and work in the county, deem this sculpture to be racist and that it is also deeply offensive. This is particularly so in the wake of the George Floyd killing and of the protests that followed to put an end to racial discrimination global-wide. Could you please confirm that the Black Said sculpture will never be restored to its position on John Street? Its place belongs in a museum or such other building so that this county's colonial past will not be forgotten. Furthermore, I will now take the liberty of reading some feedback from the Ashbourne Heritage Centre. We cannot change history, and artefacts such as the head are vital traces of our past, for better or worse, and should not be covered up, but used as examples to educate future generations. This is best achieved in a secure environment accessible to the public, such as the Visitor Information Centre at the Town Hall, where the Town Council might consider displaying the Ashbourne bushel of 1677 alongside it, or the Ashbourne Library, where display boards can provide an explanation of its context. I would also like to remind members of the Nolan Principles, which consist of good governance in an ethical culture. We must remind ourselves of selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership. Therefore, I am totally against this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne.
Thank you, Chair. Hello. Thank you, Chair. I visit Ashbourne quite regularly, and I noticed on the risk assessment, or the equal opportunities assessment, it goes into saying how many people live in the demographic of that area and nationally. I think what we mustn't lose sight of is, whilst I applaud, I wouldn't mind it going back to Ashbourne Town Council. The issue I have is that I don't like the wording of this, because there's a little bit of potential for engineering going on here, and a bit of choreography, that it's moving towards asking to ascertain where the head can legally be displayed. And at the end of the day, I think that is a move to try and get it back on the actual gantry. So I think just one person that's a visitor to Ashbourne, the Derbyshire Dales, and we are all from the Derbyshire Dales, we all welcome visitors, we applaud them to come and visit our towns, spend money in our businesses. One person from any ethnic minority that's offended by that is too many. And I think that if Ashbourne Town Council want to take this back, the head, it has to be done. And I know we were talking about covenants, and I'm going to come on to ask Mr. Braund or Lee a question in a minute that I did ask earlier, and it's a little bit complex. But I just feel that we shouldn't be leaving ourselves open to that risk of that being displayed again. I realise that the head has been detached, and it remains detached, and it would be difficult to get a covenant on the head without Heritage England's okay. But we could try to get, and we should be seeking the opinion of Heritage England as if we could get a covenant for the actual gantry to show that it will never ever be displayed on there again. I welcome the opportunity for the people of Ashbourne to have it back into their town. I applaud the option by their Heritage Committee to put it in a secure location and give due information about it. That's great. But we should not be putting it back on display. And what we mustn't lose sight of within this council is that we did vote for it never to go back up there. And I just think it's wrong. Now, the question I'd like to ask is, why haven't we, and it may be that you've not been asked, but why haven't we sought the opinion of the English Heritage, or Heritage England, to seek a covenant to restrict its erection back on that, to prevent that? I'd like to know what the cost would be if on the second part of the motion, what the cost would be for the district council to repair it up to an acceptable standard. And furthermore, I would like, if this did go ahead, I would like something in there saying that it shouldn't be displayed externally of any building. And I just think the overall thing is that if we get it wrong tonight, we're going to get some reputational damage to this local authority. That's how I feel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the covenant, as James said earlier, I was only aware of this proposal today, and quite frankly, I'm not sure that Historic England would be able to give us advice on the covenant. Their interest is going to be in what happens to the head. All I can do is report factual issues to members. It's not for me to give opinion. That's not what I'm here to do. Within the report, it talks about the Historic England's policy of retain and explain, a nice rhyming slogan. But nevertheless, that is their policy, and there's a link in the report for members to have a look at that if they wish to do so. I can't second guess what Historic England are going to want to happen, but it probably is wise to view or to predict what their views might be based on the information that they published. That's all we can do, isn't it? We can obviously ask them that question, if that's what members want us to do. What I've done in relation to the last time this came to Council, which, as James has said, was in December of last year, is act on the instructions of Council at that time to carry out a consultation with Ashbourne Town Council, the Heritage Society, and neighbouring parish councils. And the only interpretation I've done is to define what neighbouring parish councils are. That's explained within in the report. We can ask Heritage England, Historic England, I can happily do that. In terms of costs, colleagues in estates have obtained costs for some repairs to the sign. We haven't obtained costs for the head because we don't know what's intended to be done with that. If the head were to be displayed in a museum, for example, the advice of our conservation area is that really minimum work would be done on the head because you would be displaying it in relation to its current context and explaining its history. If it were to go back on the sign, then more work may need to be done to make it weatherproof. So there'll be a cost involved with that. The costs that we have obtained in relation to the sign itself relate to replacing the wood either side of it effectively, and the cost for that, to give you an idea of scale, and please don't hold us to the exact pound, but it's £1,411 plus VAT, okay? So that's the sort of order of magnitude of costs we're talking about. That cost doesn't include sign writing. There would be an additional cost in respect of that, and I don't know what that would be. I'm sorry, Councillor, when you asked 3 questions and I've answered 2. Can you remember the third one?
I think I've forgotten what it was. No, I think it was more of it was whether it was item 6, whether it could actually go as another, another thing on the actual proposal. But can I just come back one second, please? Would it not be wise that we don't deal with this evening, but we do approach Heritage England and find out what their views would be, and we do get costings, and then come back when we've got all our ducks in a row and make a decision then? I know you can't answer that.
Well, what I will say to members is my previous advice to you has been that I would, as the officer responsible, I would prefer to approach Historic England with a positive recommendation as to what was to happen to the head, rather than to say, we don't want to put it back up, what do you think? Because I suspect that won't provide them with enough information to give us a full answer. That's my professional opinion on the matter, and I can't guarantee that will be the case. I can happily approach them, but I suspect that will be the answer that we would get.
Thank you. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very interested in what everybody's had to say tonight. It is a very emotive subject. I don't want to talk about my family background or my friends, but I'm sure everybody's got their own personal views. I really would like us to make a decision this evening, a sensible, considered decision. I've seen Councillor Lee's proposal. It's the first time I've seen Councillor Lee's proposal. I'd just like Tim just to clarify, it is a very important decision. This bit about applying to the district council as to where the head can legally be displayed. Who would make that decision if it went to Ashbourne Town Council?
Okay. Yeah, thank you again, Chair. Yes, I've taken advice from planning colleagues in relation to this. As things stand with the head and sign in our ownership, we as the owners would have to make application direct to the Secretary of State, and Historic England would determine it, would deal with it on his behalf. If a listed structure belongs to somebody else, they would make that application to the District Council. It's our view that Ashbourne Town Council would make the application to the District Council, and we would determine the listed building application. In doing so, we would have to notify and consult the Secretary of State, Historic England, on his behalf.
But if Ashbourne Town Council had got it, and would this whole council make that decision if they made an application where they put it?
Effectively, it would be a form of planning application and will be determined by the planning committee.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Swindell.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and make sense. I'm absolutely drained. I've never been to a meeting that's drained me out so much. First of all, to Councillor Allison, you know, what you said was very emotive, and I'm sure everybody in here listened to it. I don't think I'll ever understand to the extent you have experienced the barriers and so on that you talked about. You know, what we can do is listen, to try and understand, and then, you know, make a decision based on what you have said. So I think your points were really helpful and give us all food for thought. I've heard a couple of times in here tonight that, in a roundabout way, accusations that the Ashbourne community is racist. That's something I'm really not happy about. I know people in Ashbourne. I have family in the Ashbourne area, and they are not racist. Some of them are Tories, but they're not racist. You know, the two don't go together. I'm struggling with the motion, Councillor Lees. It's not. I genuinely have no concern that Ashbourne Town Council have got an ulterior motive behind this. That is not what I think at all. I'm a bit like Councillor Wayne. It's just a bit vague. I need a little bit more meat on the bones to say where you intend to put it. But I do think that the Ashbourne community should have that opportunity and the Town Council to make a decision. But I'd like to know what it is first. I do have some discomfort with it being put back where it was, but I don't think it should be thrown in the bin or disposed of. I do agree that we need to learn from our history, good things and bad things. And if we just throw everything away that we ever think was wrong, we would never learn. People in the future would never know from the past what went wrong. It's an awful comparison, but Auschwitz, something that we would love to be removed from our history and never to be known that happened with such a horrible event, but it now is something that people can visit and they can learn from and experience and understand how history was, from history, what went wrong with humanity. So I don't want to see it thrown away. I would like to see it preserved somewhere where people can see it, can learn from it. But I don't think going back where it was is the right thing. But unfortunately, on the technicality of the motion, Councillor Lees and Donnelly, it's not that I think you've got any ulterior motive at Ashbourne Town Council, or I have any lack of faith in the people of Ashbourne. I think it's just, unfortunately, a bit too vague for me. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Salt.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to echo what Councillor Swindell said to Councillor Allison. I think that her comments and the way she said them were one of the most powerful things I've heard this year in a council chamber. I agree with them, apart from the bit where you thought that the Tories might think you were woke. I don't think that's the case at all. You've every right to your opinions and your feelings and to put them forward, and I'll argue with anybody on any side of the chamber that you have that right, and I'll fight for it. So I was grateful to hear what you got to say. The proposal I'm seeing for the first time this evening, sadly I'm going to say that I'm not comfortable with all of it. I was comfortable with it when I first read it. I don't think Ashbourne has any ulterior motives to put it back where it was. I think even they realise that that would be a really, really detrimental step for themselves. But in any event, I do think it belongs to people of Ashbourne, and I think that's where it should go back. They should own it, and they should be the ones that deal with it. The problem I have is if this council 6 months ago, 8 months ago, 10 months ago, whatever, resolved that it wasn't going back on public display, and I can't remember the wording of it, so it may well be that it was resolved not to go back where it was or not to go on public display. I wouldn't like to know. But I think if this council resolved that time ago, unfortunately, I think it would be a backward step for us if we didn't stick with that decision. I think what the residents, at the very least, are entitled to is consistency from the council. So if the council said that we don't want it back there, we don't think it should go back there, then I think we would be going backwards if we went back on that decision tonight. What I would have loved to have seen, of course, would have been within the proposal, you know, the future of it and where it was intended to go. But I recognise that that part of the consultation, that part of the decision hasn't been made yet. And sadly, you know, I hear what Tim says about wanting a positive thing to go forward with. But for me, I think that needs to take place, and that is something that this council will have to consider. I'm not saying for 1 minute, you know, we're going to withhold, that we should withhold what it is and that it shouldn't go back to Ashbourne, because that's exactly where it is. But if this council resolved to say we didn't want it going back in a public place, and I mean displayed publicly, then I think this council has, all right, we're not bound by it, but a moral responsibility to stick with that decision and give some consistency of it. I do think it should be displayed. I do think it should be displayed for the purposes of education. So many parts of Britain had a hand in colonial past, and I think going forward everybody can learn from that. So I think, you know, I'm pretty sure that Ashbourne's intentions will be to do that sensitively and for the purposes of education, but I would have liked to have seen it on the proposal, and sadly, because it's not there, and that question about the decision we made and whether we reverse that decision, which effectively, if we agree to the proposal in full, is what we're doing, because we then don't have any hold over whether it's going to be or where it's going to be displayed, then we'd be going back on a decision we've been made, and I don't feel comfortable doing that. So for that reason, as it stands, I wouldn't be able to support it. And my own personal view is that I think the consultation process of where it's going to be should be completed before we're asked to make that decision. I've no issue approving that proposal with the caveat that, you know, its whereabouts will have to come back to this council before actual ownership can be taken by Ashbourne. But sorry, but that's my position today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. When I first looked at this report, when I was sent the papers, I thought that we would have moved fairly quickly over this, because we have debated it at least twice, if not 3 times before, and I thought we had taken decisions, and some of those decisions have been aired again this evening. However, I have to say that I think it's been very welcome to hear again the very passionate views of members, and to go back again in debate the reasons why we all feel so sensitive about this. And I think, going back over those has been very illuminating, because it's shown just what a delicate, profound, but very important subject this is. And although it might be just one relatively small effigy, it's redolent of a whole raft of issues that I think perhaps we are going to be facing more and more in the future. This question of accommodating diverse cultures in our society, and treating them with respect and affording them the equalities that most of us enjoy. I fully support Councillor Wayne and what his position and comments were. I think that sums up entirely my views. I support what Councillor Swindle has been saying too. In the main, I support what Councillor Salt too has been laying out, with just that one exception, because I agree with Councillor Wayne. I think if we we accept wholesale the proposals that Councillor Lees has put forward, I think there is wriggle room, if I can call it that. It can be open to a little bit of political engineering. It seems to me we've got to be very firm about the decision that we, as a council, made some 6 months ago, which was under no circumstances was the effigy to be returned to its original location. But I thought we had also agreed that it would be, if accepted on consultation, be given over to the Ashbourne Heritage Group for display within a museum setting with interpretation panels, information boards. And I was very content with that. I had no objections again to Ashbourne Town Council being consulted about those deliberations and recommendations. But I very much believe and would want to stay with the ownership remaining within the district council, because I think then it gives us that control. I think that we are so anxious may be trodden on, if you like, and manipulated. So I'd be happy to stick with the sort of initial recommendations of the report, but to amplify them further, in that, again, we reiterate that the effigy should not be returned back to its original position, that we would be happy for the refurbishment and repainting of the gallows sign itself there, because that's an important fabric from the heritage of Ashbourne's historical past. But that, again, that the ownership remains within the district council. I don't think I want to say anything further. It's just those two main points for me are the crux of this matter.
Okay, right. I'm conscious of the time of what it is, so Do I find a proposer and a seconder to move that we keep the meeting going till 9 o'clock? Extend the meeting till 9. Councillor Purdy and Councillor Shirley. All those in favour? To extension till 9 o'clock. That's carried. Okay, we'll move on. Thank you. Councillor Tony Morley.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Very quickly, we were just read out great tracts of page 33, 34, 35 out of the papers we've already read, or we should have already read them, and they were selectively picked out to reflect the feelings of Derbyshire BME employee group. If you look at the other ones, there are different opinions. I admire and I applaud the passion and the eloquence with which has been spoken, but I think if we take away the decision from Ashbourne members and Ashbourne Town Council and supersede that with our own, we are flying in the face of something where we started this evening by not representing our constituents. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Martin Burford.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with much of what's been said on this side of the House, and particularly on the other side by Councillor Salt, I think, about the future of this head. I think it's a very sensitive subject. I don't agree with what Councillor Morley has just said, in fact, because when he said we should represent the feelings of Ashbourne members, I'm thinking of Councillor Rob Archer, who's not here tonight, and did go out of his way to broker a cross-party consensus answer to this problem in Ashbourne and the future of the head and where it should be located and who should have ownership of it. But unfortunately, he was ignored. His email to the other three members was totally ignored. And as far as I know, he knew nothing about this proposal that has been made tonight, even though it's been portrayed as being the work of Ashbourne members. So I think it's rather upsetting that that situation is still pertaining on this council. I agree very much with Councillor Wayne about the reputation of this council if we go against, as Councillor Salt has suggested, and Councillor Ratcliffe as well, if we go against the decision we made previously last year and whenever, several months ago anyway, that the head should never be returned to its original location above St John's Street in Ashbourne. And I wonder actually if officers have actually been informed by Ashbourne Town Council what exactly they had in mind for the head if it was returned to them. Have they discussed this with officers at all? Because we don't know what they think in effect. And as members have said, we're giving them a blank cheque in a way if we can convey it to the Town Council without very, very stringent conditions and stipulations. And I agree with Councillor Ratcliffe in that, on that issue and think that it would be far more reflective of this council's view if this council retained ownership and perhaps custodianship could be transferred either to the Town Council or to the Heritage Group in Ashbourne. Because I think it needs to be displayed somewhere publicly so that people can see it. I don't know what facilities Ashbourne Town Council have and how often people are allowed into the Town Hall or wherever it might be displayed to see the interpretation of it. But I think it should be, it's a heritage feature, if you like. It's got a heritage record, and I think it needs to be displayed somewhere with obviously interpretation, which is agreed by all and sundry, particularly by this council and representing the whole of Derbyshire Dales. I don't think we should be handing it over and then allowing someone else to interpret it in case we don't agree with them entirely. So I don't know how we go on from here, and I think probably I agree with Councillor Wayne and Councillor Ratcliffe that perhaps we need to think about this through a bit more carefully before we jump in at the deep end. And I agree something which we've only seen tonight. We haven't had time to absorb this and propose amendments to it formally. It's been very rushed. And so I'm disappointed about that. And as I said, I'm disappointed on behalf of Councillor Archer as well, who's been left out of this discussion, even though he's an Ashbourne member. So I don't know where we go from here, but those are my views, that we need to stick to the decisions we've made before and not go back to square one and allow this, this head to be displayed anywhere at Ashbourne Town Council's behest.
Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. A number of points I want to come to before I talk about some words I've offered to Councillor Lees and Donnelly. I've passed the paper back and it's the first time I've seen it tonight. If I say this has been hard work, getting to this meeting is an understatement. It really has been hard work. Councillor Archer's not been left out alone. I have conversed with him on a regular basis, and I've also said I'm sorry that the 3 Ashbourne members have not responded to him, so I have apologised to him in that email. It is a pity, I have to say, that there wasn't some dialogue on that. Having said that, I do feel that I've got a consensus of opinion with Rob on this in our exchange of emails, and it very much reflects what we've said in this authority before, in this council before, and it was agreed in this council that it should not be put back up. It was also agreed it should go in a display case. It was also agreed it should be with written words appropriate to its historical context. And those are the kind of words I expected to see in the motion or recommendation tonight. As I say, it's for Councillor Lees and to Councillor Donnelly to think on what I've passed back, because I put those sort of words in the context of such place should be in a display case in a safe place in Ashbourne. Councillor Allison, my door is always open if you feel there's something wrong on this side or a problem with this side. I've said it before to other group leaders, my door is always open. So I'm happy to discuss any problem you have if you feel you've got a problem with us. But please don't put aspersions or accusations or insinuations on anybody. Like Councillor Sir Robson has said, I'm not going to discuss my private life because none of you know it. I'm not going to disclose it. So there are things that you probably ought to know about, but I'm not going to tell you. I agree with Councillor Salt. I think that it needs, and I agree with Councillor Ratcliffe, it needs more contextualisation in the wording. We've got more or less the right wording. It needs those bits adding to it that mean that it will go into a display case in a safe place, and whether it is for our authority to then write to the Secretary of State with those proposals, I suggest that we do that whilst we own it, and then that gives us time to get the legal transfers done and dusted. So I agree with it going to Ashbourne Town Council. I've said consistently, very strongly, it should not go back up. I've said that very forcibly to many people. I think from my own previous police career, I think you'll end up with a serious public disorder on the streets in Ashbourne if that happened. And so, they do that at their own risk, put it that way. I think it would cause great upset. As I said, in all the conversations, we've pinned down these sort of points. It needs now evaluating in words. So I think I need to ask Chair if Councillor Lees and Donnelly can either agree with the wording I've added, or if we can get the finer points out now, because this cannot be deferred again. It's got to be decided tonight, it really has. This must be the 3rd meeting we've discussed this, and a decision needs to be made on it. So I think we seem to be all in agreement what wants happening to it. It needs, though, the proper wording for us to agree on it.
Councillor Lees, upon hearing what Councillor Purdy said, are you in any favour of putting that into your proposal? You'll hear it. I'm just asking the question. Sorry, we are debating on their proposal at this moment in time.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What Councillor Purdy is asking then is for it to be agreed with DDDC to be displayed in such a place in a glass case with appropriate literature to explain the history of the Black's Head. My only concern is that this is not just the Black's Head, it's the gantry, as well as it's all part of the Grade 2 star listed structure, and if this goes to the Secretary, obviously it's got to go to the Secretary of State for approval with a planning application that it's either removed or put back, whatever the Secretary of State says, where it is to be placed. And that's what basically my proposal should really have meant, that, you know, it's the end of the day, it's the decision of the Secretary of State as to where its final resting place is, which I'm sure Ashbourne Town Council would take it on board that it does go in a glass case if that is the case in the town hall, which is going to be part of a museum in the bottom area of the town hall. It's going to be a museum for people to visit all this property, etc. we've got in Ashbourne. So I'm happy for that to be added in, but you know, I've just got reservations on what the final outcome will be from the planning authority, etc. Secretary of State as to the final decision. How we come across that? If the Secretary of State says it goes back up, this authority has then got to put it back up. You know, we've already breached the planning rules by taking it down in the first place. So I'd just like to clarify or clarity on that, please. It's also if Ashbourne Town Council would still like to own it under that
Chair,
rules as well.
it would be very helpful to clarify the wording that Councillor Purdy's suggested to Councillor Lees, and if I've made the note correctly, it relates to the second part of the proposal, and after the words "can legally be displayed," following words should be inserted in a glass display case, accompanied with an appropriate appropriate literature to explain the historical context. Councillor Purdy, is that what you were effectively suggesting to Councillor Lees? Yeah. Councillor Lees, are you happy with that wording to be inserted? Chair, I'm just mindful that might help to move things along a bit in terms of the debate and potentially reaching a decision before 9. So if Councillor Lees has accepted that becomes subject to Councillor Donnelly also being in agreement.
So, Chair, is this still being retained by the District Council, or is it going to go to ownership of Ashbourne Town Council?
My understanding is that the only words inserted were in relation to the display case and the appropriate literature to accompany it. There's not been any mention of anything else. So it is still your motion, Councillor Lees, that you've had a suggestion from Councillor Purdy in terms of additional wording.
Additional wording, Chair.
Yes, just to point, Councillor Donnelly, what was you second this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just, for sake of clarity, can I just say one thing? The Ashbourne Heritage Centre is closed and will not be opening again. So that's one of the venues where it can be displayed. Yes, I'm a little bit disappointed in a way, but I'll go along with what Councillor Purdy said, but I'm very disappointed in a way that the transfer couldn't be done straight to Ashbourne Town Council and trust the Town Council, because I don't think for 1 minute there's anything in their minds whatsoever to go against what we've spoken about tonight. I know them very well. I've lived there for 60 odd years, so I don't take that on board. But, however, for the sake of getting this finished tonight and put the whole thing to bed, which has gone on for far too long, myself and Councillor Lees had a battering from the previous one. I don't want to go through all that again. I know families, so for that reason, I will go along with what's been said tonight.
Chair, just from a procedural perspective, just so, because I know we can get confused in these debates when things are flying around. So the proposer and seconder of the recommendations here have accepted Councillor Purdy's suggested wording. So in effect, that would become the substantive matter before you. So it's back to you, Chair, to bring the next speaker on that point. But clearly, members who've spoken before may have a view on that. But you have your list of speakers to go through. And I'm mindful we've got 20 minutes.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. It's a simple question. Did I hear, can I ask a question of Councillor Purdy through you? Did you, Councillor Purdy, did you also suggest that the District Council holds on to the ownership until... You didn't? Okay, fine.
Through the Chair, the wording is exactly as on your paper, but I'm happy to pick the paper up and read it exactly to you if you wish. I've passed it down, so it's simply to add such place as in a display case in a safe place in Ashbourne with appropriate literature to describe its historical context.
Okay, thank you.
Those are more or less the words.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hughes, do you want to make any more comments? Because you were the next person to speak. Okay. Councillor Buttle.
Hi, yes, thanks. We're going to have a second bite of the cherry on this one because whatever happens will come back to the planning committee. So to a certain extent, it doesn't matter too much which way we go here. But I'd like to point out, I think the sign is rather nasty and quite intimidating. And I can imagine how people in Ashbourne who've been brought up with it never saw it. They never really saw what they got across their main street. And yeah, it was just a bit of heritage and it was great. But really, it is rather a nasty bit of work. And I'm very glad to see the back of it. And I'm very, very pleased that Councillor Purdy has been quite clear that it's not going to be coming back. And thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Chair. I think the question of where of the Black's Head going back on the gantry is totally academic, and I'm sure Matlock Town Council, being sensible, intelligent people, wouldn't. What did I say? Sorry, Ashbourne. Sorry. I've been waiting so long, I've forgotten what I was going to say. Because, and I'll give you a short example, my company and most of the farms around Ashbourne, in fact around the country, have a piece of equipment called a JCB telehandler. It's 150 horsepower, it's got 4 wheels, it's capable of doing 45 miles an hour, and it's got a front arm that will extend to the height of this roof. One of those would drive along Ashbourne, along the street, would destroy the Black's Head within 5 seconds and be 20 miles away before anybody had realised. What I'm trying to say is that it is an absolute guarantee that if that went back onto the gantry in Ashbourne, it would be destroyed within weeks.
I'll be quick.
Okay.
I'd just like... If that goes in, that Councillor Purdy has mentioned, I'd like Lee's view on the legality of can we bind, does that bind Ashbourne Town Council to do that, or once it's in their ownership, stewardship, well ownership, are they free to do with it what they want? Thank you.
Thank you, through to you, Chair. There will be a way around this legally. There mostly would have to be a separate legal agreement with some sort of consideration, even if it's a peppercorn, just to make it legally binding. But of course that would be subject to Ashbourne Town Council agreeing to enter into that sort of binding contract with us, that we could tell them where it needs. If they refuse, then the head would most really have to retain in our ownership if you would want those conditions to apply.
We could do, because obviously we've said a lot tonight about what this council wants to have happen to the head. And I take Councillor Donnelly's point about the intention of Ashbourne Town Council, but I would just feel more secure if we had some legal sort of hold to say that, you know, we want it in it should be displayed in a display case and not externally at all. It just remains in that, wherever it is, whether it's the town hall or wherever. Thank you.
Is there anybody else wishing to make any more comments? Councillor Gamble.
Just one thing as an addition to what Steve said, really. with a legal sort of something in place legally to say that this is the position, this is where I want it to go. But also, I would like something as to what is defined as an appropriate description. And who is going to come up with this appropriate description? I imagine there are many interpretations of what an of this appropriate description, and I would like some more clarification on that. Lee, is there anything?
I think at the moment, until I don't know the historical background of the sign enough to be able to suggest any particular wording, but
no,
if we was entering into an agreement, then we could specify in that agreement of what wording the council would expect to be displayed.
Or the type of wording, or maybe who... I mean, I know someone's just said that the Heritage Society is closed. Is there still people around for them to come up with the wording? I'm just thinking, I think if we're going to have this explained, we want it in a much broader context than so it's possible to do it with an agenda, isn't it?
I can understand where you're coming from, Councillor Gamble. I think it's to try and figure that out tonight, but taking your points on board, if we have to enter into a legal agreement, then we can look into the specifics of the wording and who potentially could suggest those.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rowe.
Got my mic on. I'm just a bit confused as why we're transferring this to Ashbourne Town Council, what the benefit is in terms of, its cultural heritage. If we retain ownership of it, we're in control of decisions that are made about it, and we can loan it to the Town Council, or we can loan it to the secondary or the primary school in Ashbourne to display. I'm just confused as to why we get into legal expense and legal wranglings and take time up with planning decisions, and why we're not just retaining the blackhead. We've got a clear directive from members as one council that, what we want to happen to it. And I'm not quite sure why we're giving over control. When, as Councillor Wayne said, it's about visitors to the Derbyshire Dales. It's not just about Ashbourne. Thank you.
Okay. I understand. Councillor Wakeman, please. And then...
Questions have been answered. But some that's come from the other side, that Black Lives Matter. I think all lives matter.
We've discussed this for quite a long time, and it's been backwards and forwards to this council. I think we now got a proposal that works well. There is always the tendency to want to write more and more detail into it, but actually that just means we'll be here for another 6 months trying to decide this. We've got the context, we've got the proposal, and my view is we should go with it. It's a good solution for Derbyshire Dales and a good solution for Ashbourne.
Thank you. Councillor Purdy, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's an easy answer to this, quite frankly. And that is, we were told by the speaker tonight that there is an eminent historian called Maxwell Craven, OBE, and I'm sure he can help with the description on the artefact. And on the other point about legality, I would suggest we add the words, and delegated authority be given to our officers to, in negotiation with Ashbourne Town Council officers, to determine all that's been discussed, and it will be all minuted tonight, all that's been discussed and minuted tonight on the wishes of this council.
Right. It's been moved and seconded with those additional wordings in. Sorry, Councillor Slack.
Come in before you do that, Chair.
Okay.
I've been waiting quite a while. Come back again.
Sorry, didn't see your hand.
Thank you, Chair. I think the stumbling block is two issues. The one is the ownership. And the second one is a wording and caption which will go in front of the effigy. number one, if the ownership is wrong, it's transferred from the district council reputation will fall to tatters. If it stops with the district council, we can control it far better, because there's a wider range of opinions on the district council, and we can control it better if it stops with the district council. And I feel much, much safer, and I know lots and lots of people will feel safer if it's with the district council, as we are responsible for it. And we should not duck our responsibility by transferring it. And also the caption which goes underneath is very, very important. If the wrong caption is put underneath, that will arouse many, many people who go to look at it, and it'll arouse a lot of racialism if we don't get it wrong. So I appeal to the council tonight to keep it, the district council, to keep it in their ownership. There's no harm in it going to Ashbourne, but it's got to be under the control of the district council as a responsible elected body. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I've heard what you've had to say. Councillor Purdy, can you confirm the progression of the legality? Obviously, I think Lee made a point that obviously with the transfer of anything, whatever it is, to anybody, legal sides have to work and people have to work together anyway. So surely, if we've given the authority to the delegated services to actually take control and do these actions. So I feel that it has been put in there in that, and I would have thought that was how it felt, but obviously Councillor Purdy.
That's why, with respect, Chair, I said this is a simple matter, because that's exactly what would happen. It's going to go to our legal people, and they're going to have to discuss it with the Ashbourne Town Council. So I see that as a natural course of action. So, Chair, I we move to the vote.
Yeah, it has been moved and seconded. Sorry? Yeah, well, it's just going upon, following on from the recommendations of the Blackhead, the council has to determine the future siting of the Blackhead figure. The council determines the next steps to be taken for the sign, and the authority given to the legal thing. Then this is the proposal from Councillor.
Chair, if I can assist, so that the wording that you have written down in front of you on the papers that's been circulated remains the same, other than at point 2, with the words, after the words "be displayed," we insert the words "in a glass display case accompanied with an appropriate literature to explain the historical context." I've not been aware of any other amendment. I think the point was made that the point about the legality that will have to be explored is covered in point 5 about the actions that Tim and myself will have to take away outside the meeting. So effectively that insertion of the words "in a display case accompanied with appropriate literature to explain the historical context" is the only change to what you've got written here.
Back to you, James. Are you saying that proposal 2 here is being taken out entirely?
No.
Why does Ashbourne Town Council need to apply to the District Council for listed building consent in respect of the head?
They would if you were transferred, as the very first point was made, the request to actually transfer the full ownership. If that was the case, whatever was needed to be done, it was the town council. If the district keep hold of it, they will have to serve themselves listed building planning consultation.
You know, we've been given a paper with quite substantial text on, with proposals that we've been considering. One of the emerging points from all the conversation I've heard has been that this has been quite complex and sophisticated to a degree that some members, including myself, are a bit cautious about adopting it, because it's open to manipulation if we're not careful. I agree that, I fully agree that there may not be any intent, but it's there if it's in a legal setting. If the district council are remaining as the owners, all the subsequent sophisticated actions are dependent on them, not the Ashbourne Town Council. The Ashbourne Town Council are not going to be the owners of this.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. They made the amendment to take out that bit where head can be legally placed by putting it in a glass case, and I think that side of it has been done. The thing being is, it has been proposed, there is a proposal on the table, so now we're going to the vote, and if your feelings are still to that issue, then that will be the way you vote on it. So, is everybody in understanding of what we're going to do? Because then we're going to all have to run. So, can I have a show of hands for the proposal on the table? Show of hands for all. Against? Abstentions? The motion is carried. With that, I thank everybody for their time and attention. And what bit we've got.